Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this third round of the Italian Youth Debate Championship in English. Today, we are here to witness a debate on the following motion. This House would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. There's also an info slide that says novel foods refers to foods introduced in Europe from May 15, 1997, whose marketing is currently regulated by European Regulation 2015/2283. The proposition will be defended by the team from Tuscany. Is this correct? From Tuscany? Okay. Which city of Tuscany?
Okay. We are near Massa.
Near Massa, okay. The Da Vinci Debaters is correct. Your name? Oh, okay. Da Vinci Debaters, while the opposition will be defended by the team from Lombardy, the Fedebaters. I would now like to ask the teams to introduce themselves, starting from the pro team. Please.
I'm Nicole Ribolla. I'll be the first speaker for the opposition team and also do the reply.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Azar Agoud, and I'm the second speaker of the opposition team.
Ajar, but we can't hear you well.
Can
no.
I would change location.
Okay, we go on with the first speaker.
And I will be the third, and I'm Francini Camilla.
Okay, thank you. And then the opt-in.
Good evening, my name is Filippo Visconti and I will be the first speaker for the opposition team.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Carlos Pano and I will be the second opposition speaker, and I will also give the reply speech.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kendra Begzua and I'm the third speaker of the opposition team.
Thank you. And then let us introduce the panel of judges who will be adjudicating this debate. My name is Massimo Leone, and I will be the chair of this panel. Then, with me, we have...
I'm Chiara Di Bello, and I will be a judge.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Giulia Latore, and I will be a judge.
Okay. Ajar, would you repeat your presentation?
Hello, Azar Agugi, and I'm the second speaker of proposition team.
It's clear for everyone? Okay. Thank you, Ajar. Before we begin, a quick reminder of the rules you already know so well. But it's possible that someone watching this debate or the video recording might not know this. This debate will consist of 6 constructive speeches of 8 minutes each, starting with the first speaker for the proposition. During this speech, between the 2nd and the 7th minute, opposing speakers may offer points of information. I assume you are all in agreement to take this orally. It's correct? Verbally? Okay. The debate will then conclude with the rebuttal speech lasting 4 minutes each, starting with the counting. So, if everyone are ready, there's some of Chiara or Giulia, can you take the time or the official time of the speech? It's possible?
I haven't got the app right now.
Mm-hmm.
Me neither.
Okay, so 1 moment, please. So I will take the time. One moment. Okay. Are you ready? We can start? Okay. So I give the floor to the first speaker of the proposition team. Please.
We, Team Opposition, believe that for a fairer and more open European market and a safer European Union for a food perspective, all food already on the market must undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel food. Few sector points then. A novel food A is, according to the European Commission, a food that wasn't largely consumed in Europe before May 15, 1997. Examples, chia seeds or Antarctic krill oil. And B has to comply to the European Safety Assessment, which implies how a country can apply for its products to be admitted to European markets, as well as the procedures that are initiated when an application is submitted. In the first place, the country has to present the food, telling where it comes from, how it is produced, and affiliating scientific proof that the food didn't cause any problems to the health of the citizens over certain years. At that point, the Commission will review the request, subjecting the foods to qualitative and toxicological analysis, and must respond to the requesting country within 7 months. So, we need to identify where's the problem. The problem is that a sector such as the European food industry, which generates over a turnover of over 1 trillion of euros per year, is dominated by European companies that sell food products that have been widely available and well known in Europe, and so they can't be considered as novel food. We're talking about companies as Barilla, Ferrero, and the French company Danone, which are not subjected to the restrictions applied to emerging companies that would like to use more modern techniques or introduce new foods in the market. The problem is then that some companies have to undergo to certain restrictions and laws and some don't, leading to a situation where the companies that don't have to answer to these laws are stronger, bigger, wealthier than the ones that are obliged to. So why should we take action? Because Europe is currently seeing its ideals of equality and open market fall apart. Producers do not have the same opportunity to enter the European market, and they can find they can be subjected to more comprehensive analysis that some European producers are freely trading at the moment may be not able to pass. So why extending the law is more effective than anything else? Because this law is more comprehensive. It provides of greater controls and more detailed documentation of the safety of the food, and by extending it, we'll extend the control and the safety. Today we'll bring you 3 arguments in which we'll analyze this topic. No. In the first, we'll see how extending the law will guarantee commercial and legal equality, and the second, how it will ensure greater safety for citizens, and the third, how we will going to dismantle discrimination in the EU. I will tackle the first 2 aspects. The second speaker will talk about the third argument. So going on the first argument, extending the laws will guarantee commercial and legal equality. The EU is built on the assumption in the economic sphere that all similar products are regulated under the similar laws. We call this assumption commercial equality, and the belief that citizens are equal before the law, and we call this legal equality. When these assumptions are violated, equality becomes something merely theoretical. Extending EU novel foods legislation to all products in order to prevent the collapse of these values that are so important is therefore not a political choice, but rather a structural necessity. In fact, when we treat some products differently from others, the result is discrimination. But we can prevent this mechanism from happening by extending this law that will guarantee equal opportunity to everybody to enter the market, even to all the products that have been, all the foods that have been produced after 1997. Let's get, for example, a Norwegian producer that wants to develop an innovative energy drink with a new, yes.
What part of the regulation states that it's actually safer than the status quo?
Well, we are telling you that it's safer, and we're trying to demonstrate it. It's written that it's more complete because they have to bring the legislation to us that they have to bring scientific proof of the effect of the history of this product on the health of citizens. Thing that maybe producers like Barilla don't have to do. Okay, so let's continue. So let's say the Norwegian and French producer want to bring a similar drink into the market, but the Norwegian producer, which is not into the EU, has to pass more complete analysis. Okay, and this brings him to have a different way to enter the markets. Okay, now we suppose that EU novel food legislation is extended to all comparable products. Okay, this will bring the market to accept products regardless of their origin, and this we think is the way to make sure that legal and commercial equality is guaranteed. So moving on to the second argument, ensuring greater safety for citizens. We think that when it comes to safety for the citizens' health, we have to base everything on effective scientific protections, okay? So on science research, okay? As I said before, to enter the EU market, an all food have to present studies and scientific proof of their benefits on society. But this creates an enormous gap between the treatment, the way we treat food, novel foods and normal traditional foods. Why? Because as many traditional food don't undergo the regulation and the safety framework of novel foods, they don't have to say their impacts or their history on the individual health. A consequence of this is that we can find foods that are not necessarily safe on the market. For example, cold cuts, okay, that have been proved to generate cancer in the people that consume them in a high quantity. But the EU is relying on the assumption that traditional or well-known foods are always safe, even if produce methods scientific knowledge change. But this assumption can't be true, or at least can't be justified, as it's misleading and dangerous. Let's get, for example, the food fire pizza that have been regularly consumed by Italian families for generations, okay? Scientific studies tell us that the emissions from wood fire ovens are extremely dangerous for our health. But people nonetheless buy these products because they think that as pizza cooked in the oven, wooden oven, are safe. I think we
protective time.
We are in the are safer. Okay. They think that tradition equal safe, but this is not. This can't be true. Okay. So we think that by extending this law, we'll make sure that all the products that are not really healthy will be banned from the market. And this will increase the safety of the citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your speech was of 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Okay. If the other judges are ready. Ready? Okay. So we can give the floor to the first speaker of the opposition team. Please.
Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Honorable panel, fellow debaters, the issue we're debating today is not about accepting or rejecting a new regulation without discussion. It is about whether or not the current regulatory approach to food in Europe is not only safe, but also economically sustainable, proportionate, and grounded in the effective reality, which are the criteria that we will follow throughout the whole debate to sustain our position. In particular, we think that the status quo must be defended and is actually the best proposal that we have today, the maintenance of the status quo. So today, novel foods are, of course, at the center of the debate because the regulation around them is very restrictive. However, we are ignoring a key fact that was not really clear from the point of view of the proposition team, that actually all foods in the EU market have to undergo safety assessment. Of course, not the one for novel foods, but we have a law called General Food Law that guarantees that every food in the EU market is safe. And if any risk or a suspect of a risk arises, then the food is checked from a scientific level and not only from the history of use, as you said. And if it is not considered safe anymore, then it is removed from the market. And I would now like to comment the problem analysis provided by the other team. They have, I refuse. They have said that at the present day, some industries, some producers have to undergo the novel food safety assessment and some don't. But this is not actually a problem because novel foods cannot be automatically considered safe for the European Union standards. European Union has higher standards than any other group of states or state in the world. And so we cannot be sure that food that is not consumed in the European Union on a large scale before 1997 can be considered safe. So that is not a problem. Now, let's analyze more deeply the stakeholders involved by the motion we are debating today. First of all, we have consumers. They are the final aim of every legislation that is taken by the European Union because they are the one directly affected by the regulations and the laws. They want their food not only to be safe and of high quality, which is not exclusive to the proposition team, but they also want them to be economically affordable, which is a point that the proposition team didn't even touch. Then we have another important stakeholder, the industries. The industries are directly affected because they have to respect the laws and regulations imposed by the European Union. And we would like to divide them into two major groups. We have on one side multinationals which have a great economical capability. And so probably it wouldn't be that big of a problem for them to pay for the scientific dossiers required by the novel food safety assessment. But then we also have small and medium enterprises, abbreviated in SMEs, who don't have the same economical capability as multinationals. And we will demonstrate to you that they would be negatively affected by the proposition team's plan. And then our last stakeholder, maybe the most important actor of the motion, the European Union, because it is the international organ that establishes the laws and regulations that everyone must follow. And specifically, we're talking here about the EFSA, European Food Safety Authority, which is an independent EU agency that provides scientific advice in the field of food safety. So, before I move on to our team line, I would like to briefly rebut something that was not clear from the first argument. The first speaker provided us with an example of, he said, a drink that the France and Norway want to put in the European market. Of course, Norway would have to undergo the novel food safety assessment, but if a food was consumed for at least 25 years in a state outside of the European Union, then the process is much faster, and it is only of 4 months. So actually, it would not be so difficult for Norway, let's say, to put this food or drink in the market. Now, let's move on to our team line, which is made of 3 arguments that will make you understand why the maintenance of the status quo is the best option. First of all, we think that the extension of the novel food safety assessment is bad because it is economically unsustainable. It makes procedures longer and longer bureaucracy and higher costs. Then we think that this reform is unnecessary and redundant because, as we said, every food, even non-novel foods in the EU, must undergo safety assessment that are regulated by other laws. And then, lastly, we think that the motion, this motion, would advantage large corporations and multinationals, and would instead go to undermine small producers and food biodiversity in the market. Now, let's move on to our first argument. I will repeat it. We think that the plan provided by the proposition team is too expensive, too slow, and not grounded in effective reality. Let's first analyze the time procedures, the length in time of the procedures. So according to the law, the procedure going from the first application of for the novel food to the final acceptance of the food in the novel food list should take maximum 18 months of time. However, if we look at reality, even the most optimistic estimates say that the average time for these procedures is 2.5 years, which is almost double the time that is promised by the regulation. So we can see that the law is already struggling only with novel foods. If we think to extend this safety assessment to all the thousands of foods in the European Union, do we really think that it would improve the food market? No, of course, it would make procedures even longer, and it would stop the market and damage it inevitably. Then let's analyze the economical point of view. As we said, first of all, industries have to bring an application with a scientific dossier that can cost a lot, because some estimates say that these dossiers can cost from 20,000 euros to 45,000 euros for every ingredient. So it is a high cost for industries. And then it would raise costs also for the European Union, because it would have to increase the staff of the EFSA to carry out all these scientific researches. And then who will ultimately pay all these higher costs? Of course, consumers, because if industries find that their production is raising in costs, then they would increase the prices of the food. And in a European Union where an average human, an average citizen spends 21.8% of their income on foods and beverages, according to a Eurostat data analysis of 2024. Do we really think that raising these prices even more is a smart action? Of course, it is not. Panel, through my speech today, I demonstrated to you that the plan of the proposition team is not economically sustainable because it involves long bureaucracy and procedures. It would make the economical burden for European Union and industries even larger, and it would damage the very first stakeholder that we should have in mind while debating this motion, which are the consumers. For this reason, we think that the maintenance of the status quo would result in a more effective and better solution. With this, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. Your speech is 7 minutes and 57 seconds. Okay. The other judges are ready. Okay, we can go. So we give the floor to the second speaker of the proposition team, please.
Hello, the debaters. Hello, the judges. I'm going to bring the third argument, which is discrimination within the EU. But first, let's rebuttal what the first speaker of opposition team said. They concentrated their arguments in the fact that the process of all of the process is, they said, unnecessary and redundant and too expensive. First of all, we don't think that it is unnecessary, but it is really helpful because it will grant the citizens safety. Also, you said that it is too expensive. Well, first of all, the motion does not tell us if the EU will be able or not to invest money in these processes, but at the same time, we can't give money. We can't give an amount of money to safety. We think it is better to invest money in. No, thank you. We think it is better to invest money in safetyness, right? Spending lots of money, for example, in people going to hospitals because the foods that were consumed, the so-called traditional foods, are not that healthy. Also, the industries will also lose reliability after, for example, many consumers will start feeling really bad. They won't buy anything from that industry. Yes?
In the current status quo, are people that are buying groceries and food chain products feeling bad as you claim?
Sorry, can you repeat? I didn't understand.
In the status quo, are the people buying these products feeling bad as you claim?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your POI, so I'm going to continue. So I'm going to dive into the third argument, is discrimination within the EU. So all novel foods have to undergo many procedures, even if they have been traditionally consumed in other countries for centuries. So foods from other European countries, just EU, after 1997, for example, Malta, the foods that are from these countries, they are considered novel foods, and this creates discrimination within the EU. Because, first of all, foods from EU countries, for example, foods from France, foods from Italy, food from Spain, they don't have to undergo procedures like, for example, Croatian food. When Croatia joined the EU after 1997, an example of Croatian food was Croatian fermented insects protein powder that was considered a novel food, and it had to undergo many examinations. What does this tell us about the different cultures? So this tells us that there are some food cultures which can be considered valid. So we consider, for example, Spanish food, French food valid, but without, of course, they are considered valid without a strict regularization as the EU wants. And that also tells us that there are some others that need to undergo the European safety assessment. So, which kind of prejudices do we have against the culinary cultures of other nations? We think exactly that this type of law, for these particular reasons, especially for the reason of discrimination, this law creates inequality, and just like I said before, it creates discrimination. The the solution would be to extend the regulation to all the food on the market. In this way, we will prevent disparity to harm cultures. Yes.
If you extend this law and you have the EU regulation for all foods, what about the other foods that have to face the other types of controls? Wouldn't they be discriminated in your scenario?
Well, no, they aren't going to be discriminated. Anyways, our solution will be to extend the regulation to all the food on the market. And like I said, in this way, we will prevent disparity to harm cultures by putting all the foods on the same level. Also, if we think about the EU's goals, isn't it to prevent discrimination within the EU? And we also think that even though we could even not think about it, discrimination and inequality can also happen inside through food. So that's why if we extend the law to all the foods, this will cancel every discrimination. And it is also, if we don't extend it, it is also a contradictory act of the EU, because the EU's goal is to prevent disparity, inequality, discrimination within the EU. Thank you.
Thank you. Your speech was of 7 minutes and 19 seconds. Okay. If we are ready, we can give the floor to the second speaker of the opposition team, please.
Okay. Okay. So if everyone's ready, okay, my speech will start. Panel, as the second opposition speaker, you can expect two main things in my speech. First, I will deliver rebuttals against the proposition's framework, arguments, and impacts that they claim the motion would bring, and then I will move on to developing the two closing arguments of our side's teamline. But let me begin with a very simple and clear framework clarification that the proposition side hasn't actually talked about. We value safety and quality in the status quo just as much as the proposition team does. No one in this debate is arguing, and nobody ever will argue, against food safety in the European Union. The real disagreement lies elsewhere, actually. And what is such disagreement? The disagreement is about whether this safety is already granted or not, because we must remember that we are talking about non-novel foods that would have to undergo the same assessment, safety assessment, now mandated for novel foods, a different assessment that wasn't created for them in the first place. So high levels of food safety are already granted in the status quo because the European Union is not careless and ignores non-novel food safety. They already grant it with another specific set of laws that are called the General Food Law. And I will delve deeper into this aspect in my second argument. But also the proposition team keeps describing a reality, a scenario in which food safety is failing, the consumers are always at risk, and nobody is protected. But that's simply not the case. It doesn't reflect reality even remotely. Our position is clear. We believe that this plan, the proposition plan, is unnecessarily complex, expensive, unnecessary on top of that, and that it damages the very first stakeholders that we must protect. The proposition team doesn't even try to protect them because they just think about expanding this regulation without claiming the impact that it would bring. But Moving on to the third argument, which states that their proposal would resolve all the discriminations that are taking place in the European Union right now. The point is that they have assumed that a law, to be fair, must be the same for any type of food. They don't care about what type of food we're talking about. They only care about applying the same law. And I'm asking you, would it be the same thing to try and take care of a dog in the same way you would take care of a cat? Obviously not, because the law that they are proposing to extend to everyone is not fair for everyone. It's equally wrong for everyone because it doesn't take into account the specific requests that any specific food requires. It's not that the European Union is bad and we want novel foods to undergo more safety assessment because we discriminate third part countries' food culture. It's just that we don't actually know how this will what impact it will have on the European population, which is different from third countries' population. And this is a focal point that must be very clear. Yes.
Are you aware that these laws are also on countries that entered the EU after 1997, as Croatia? And so you are only analysing only certain countries and not all Europe.
Yes, but the point is that the way to solve this problem is surely not applying your proposal, because it's a simply too complex approach that doesn't actually reward us with anything. It's just too complex and isn't the right way to act. And I'll show you this in my two arguments. Now let's talk about our second argument, which claims that non-novel foods already undergo assessment for safety and quality that more than enough to grant safety for the consumers. So ask yourself the fundamental question, why was a separate law created for novel foods in the first place? Because novel foods weren't consumed on a large scale before 1997 for these 35 years. Non-novel foods, on the contrary, by contrast, they were consumed already safely. And what does this tell us? This tells us that these foods were already proven to be safe, because these proofs are real, effective, and on a long term, sure. So that is precisely why non-novel foods are regulated differently, because we already have the evidences of their safety. Today, as I said before, they fall under the General Food Law, based on the regulation EC number 178/2002, which already includes the principle that only safe food may be placed on the market, and this is preventive because we don't allow unsafe food to be placed on the market. Full legal responsibility for the producers of the food, so that this acts as a deterrent for those who may not comply with the law. Complete traceability across the food chain, together with a continuous risk assessment on the production line, and an immediate withdrawal of any unsafe product. So if a product is checked as unsafe, it's immediately taken away from the market. So when novel foods undergo different assessments in the status quo from novel foods, it's not because the European Union is careless and doesn't think about the problems that may arise. It's because the risks are known and we know how to act about them. The proposition's approach ignores this distinction and treats any food as if it were the same. All foods on the same way we treat new foods, which is simply unnecessary because it's redundant. And this is not precaution, but is a mere unnecessary regulatory overkill. That being said, let us move to our third argument, which states that extending the regulation, as the proposition says, would only disadvantage small and medium enterprises, also known as SMEs, and only advantage multinationals, damaging the traditional food landscape that we have in Europe and we are famous for. The European food market is based on SMEs, which are the backbone of it. Take Italy as an example. According to the Prometheus Structural Database of 2022, 98.10% of food and drink companies in Italy are SMEs. And also in the whole of the European Union, SMEs generate 40.1% of the total drink and food turnover, and they employ 56.7% of the workforce in this sector, according to a Eurostat survey of 2021. The majority of these producers will not be able to afford all the complex and scientific dossiers that the proposition team says that would be needed to grant safety, because they're much expensive. We've already said that in the first argument. And what is the impact of this scenario? Two main impacts. The first one is that we would lose job places, because the employers wouldn't be able to put their products on the market if they don't have the money to pay for the safety assessments, and so they would be forced to fire the employees. Also, loss of traditional products and erosion of biodiversity, because if they don't have the money to make the safety assessment, they don't have the capability of putting their products on the market, the turnover amounts to zero, and they all fail. So products protected under quality schemes such as protected designation of origin, also known as PDO, and protected geographical indication, also known as PGI, are concrete examples of foods produced by these SMEs, which effectively combine on one side wellness and on the other one food safety. Traditional foods produced under these regulations follow strict and legally defined specifications that ensure traceability and continuous official monitoring to grant safety and quality. From a food safety point of view, these long-established regulatory frameworks grant safety always, because if they don't, they're not called such as such. Also, at the same time, they grant quality because the processes used are traditional and are liked by the consumers, and on top of that, they are safe, as I said before. So, PDO and PGI products represent a reliable model in which traditional regulatory control and consumer well-being are successfully integrated. And beside that, they're important for us, and they already survive in the status quo. When they do not survive, in proposition side view of the future. So the word proposed at proposition team is a word where only multinationals and big companies thrive and smaller ones perish. Our word is better, the status quo is better, because it is more stable, more inclusive, and more respectful of our food culture, which is fundamental for us as Europeans. Panel, we have given you throughout our first two speeches 3 clear reasons why we must reject the motion. 1, it creates excessive costs, delays, and bureaucracy. 2, it is unnecessarily redundant because non-novel foods already undergo safety assessment that are effective. And 3, it undermines SMEs and food diversity, advantaging large corporations at the expense of consumers and tradition. Food safety must be effective and proportionate, not maximalist and destructive. For these reasons, the motion should and must be rejected. With this, I conclude my speech. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you. 8 minutes and 25 seconds. Okay. Ready, everyone? Okay. So we give the floor to the first speaker of proposition, please.
Yes, just a moment. Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So I would like to rebuttal 3 of the things that the opposition team said. In first place, they are constantly assuming that the general regulation for the food safety already guarantees the safe for foods. But if it already exists a regulation that guarantees the safety for all the foods on the market in the European Union, why would it exist a new regulation? So, which is the one for novel foods? it is obviously that then the new regulation for novel food has to be more complicated and it is more detailed. The one that includes just general food. So for this reason, this regulation creates disparity with the disparity between foods, between commerciants, as the other team, my team had said before. So they said also that if one food has an history of consumption behind it, then their time to enter in the European Union is much minor. But even if this could be true, then the risk that this food is not the risk that this food will not be included in the market is still present. So let's give an example. We brought the example of a Norway commerciant that wants to sell an energy drink. And the opposition team said that if this product has an history of consumption behind it, then it will be very much more faster to enter in the European Union. But this doesn't mean that it will actually enter in the European Union. The risk that it will be excluded is still there. And this is why, even if it could be faster, it is still discriminating. Because this... No, thank you. Okay, so then I would like to rebuttal also another assumption from the opposition team. They said that the history of consumption of a food guarantees in a certain way the safety, but this is not true, and I can bring an example. For example, cold cuts are cancerogenic, and it is science, but they are still on the market, and they are not risking to be excluded from the European market. So this is just, yes?
How in your model, the risk of being excluded from the EU market is prevented exactly?
Sorry, I don't understand.
How is it that in your model, this very risk of being excluded from the EU market is prevented precisely?
So, like, for now, cold cuts does not have to undergo to the regulation. So it just stays on the market. But I'm just saying that the history of consumption of a food doesn't mean that it is safe, has scientific studies said. Then I would like to say another thing about what the first speaker of proposition said. He said that this motion applied on reality will be a lot more economically unsustainable, and it would it will require too much time to be actually put on the reality. So this we understand that it could take a lot of time, but we do not expect this long process to be solved in a few months or in few years. We could try to proceed in phases, maybe in a strategic way, where we can give high priority to the food that are already risky for the safety, such as cold cuts, as I said before, and then give maybe less priority to the ones we are more sure that are not risky for the safety of people. So proceeding in this way will let EFSA to divide this long procedure, no thank you, in phases, so that it could be sustained more easily. Then the last thing that I would like to say, it is about the last argument of the opposition team. The opposition team says that it will be economically unsustainable for small commerciants to undergo to this regulation. But actually, the European Union will have to prove the safety of the type of foods, not all the products of the same type of food of the different industries. So, for example, a lot of industries sell cheese, certain type of cheese. European Union doesn't have to prove the safety of every cheese that is sold, every same type of cheese that is sold from different industries. It just has to prove that that type of food, that general type of food, it is safe for the citizens. So European Union will have to cover the costs by herself and not asking more money to the small industries or to these industries in general. I conclude with that.
Thank you. 8 minutes and 5 seconds.
Okay.
Un attimo, soltanto, scusate. Okay. We can give the floor to the first speaker of opposition team, please.
Okay, 2 seconds. Let me get my timer. All right. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Assumption. That is the word I would like to use to describe and summarize the material that has been brought to us from proposition team. A model, a mechanism that lacks total mechanization, that lacks total explanation, for which their side of the house, their view of the world is actually better than the status quo, brings safety more compared to the status quo. Safety, a very interesting word. The word has been brought on and on and on, probably about 15 times during the three speeches I've heard. Not in one time have they brought one. Why do they ensure safety to all the people, only taking into consideration one of the many stakeholders we've brought to you, which is the consumers, without taking into consideration the other stakeholders we brought to the table, for example, small enterprises? And second, explain how exactly is safety exclusive to the side of the house? Because we've proven to you that right now in the status quo, we have different and many regulations that takes care of the different risks of the different types of food, that takes care of the different types of food present in the food chain, and that ergo, I refuse, that ergo ensure safety. But let's move on to which are the actual metrics of the debate, which will path and establish our path to the ballot. First, ensuring feasibility and implementability. So bring it to the table a model that is economically sustainable and proportional. Second point, risk management quality. 13, stakeholder impact and welfare. And third point, ground on regulatory reality. During this whole speech, during the whole debate, opposition team has brought to the table how not only did we tackle all of this point, but how we present a word, aka the status quo, that brings this point into a better place, into a better environment compared to what has been brought by the proposition team. But before I stand on analyzing the clashes that are going to be my last point, some pieces of rebuttal. First, their third and last speaker talks about regulation, which I believe was to talk about the general food law. Please let's be precise that we're talking about regulations, so plural. We have different regulations that take care of the food chain system in the status quo, that tackle the different type of risks, which is a statement, which is a fact that the proposition team didn't take into consideration, not even one time. But later, I refuse. But later, what did the third speaker brought to the table? He said the reason why we should extend this regulation to the whole food chain system is because why will it be born in the first place, right? Why will we need a regulation about novel food if the status quo was enough? But let's remember that is an extension. That is an extension of a functioning legislation. We are not denying the fact that the novel food regulation is useful. I refuse. The novel food regulation is useful right now, but we cannot consider or even think that an extension of law is enough to cover the extension of risk present in the whole totality of the food chain system. Please, let's take this to account. Let's take this into total consideration. Second and last point of rebuttal, the general model. They bring in a model with the values that are currently in the status quo. They bring values such as safety, transparency to the client, and whatsoever that are currently present in the status quo without actually bringing to the table any point of exclusivity. I accept.
So, what is the difference between the regulation for general food and for novel food in terms of safety?
Thank you for asking the question. In terms of safety, what is different is that the regulation for novel food only tackles a specific area of novel food, which is the regulation of them being present in Europe right now. Where the general food law tackles all the points when it comes to, for example, genetically changed products, such as food or whatsoever, takes care of the production times, takes care of the production environment, and so on and on and on, and which are all points that are not in any way tackled in the novel food regulation, or you didn't bring that point to the table. Let me go on with what I was saying. So they're lax in their model. So as I was saying, they bring a model that describes the value of the status quo, and they bring a view of the status quo as an environment that's completely deprived of any legislation, as if we don't have any law that right now ensures stability, ensures safety, brings any kind of technological innovation for which this food in the food chain are controlled, which is completely nonsensical due to the fact that my first and second speaker took their blessed time to describe to you how this is efficient and how this is possible and happens due to the fact that we have different regulation that tackles the different type of risk in the food chain system. So they bring this status quo as if we don't have scientific innovation or any effort that we put into the food chain, and trying to make it this way exclusive to their side. But my question is to them, what makes it then exclusive? Since I've tackled and rebutted this point, what exactly in your model is exclusive to your side? What would actually push us to rely on your side of the house? Where is the innovation? And do you know where the answer actually came? From the third speech, where not only did they bring a shift of the path to the ballot, but they also bring a shift on the model itself, bringing a category-based model which first of all doesn't even interact with the actual regulation of novel food. And do you know why? Because the regulation of novel food is no way category based, but it's product based, making the model that has been brought from the proposition time completely nonsensical and completely mixing it, falling down completely. So going on then with the points of clashes I've found during this debate. First, point of feasibility and stakeholder. So cost versus moral priority. Proposition team brings to the table and says that safety has moral priority over cost, that cost is justified by long-term benefit. So to them, if something increases safety, which doesn't, because we've brought to you many times, an extension of this regulation will bring only controls that are already present by the general food law. So to them, if something increases safety, it is worth in doing the grounds as the feasibility. But do you know why opposition wins? Because first, regulation that cannot be implemented has zero impact. So of course doesn't reject safety. If we had a model in which could assure us total and 100% safety, there's no way we would be against that. What we reject is unworkable safety. The FSA already struggles with novel foods on its own, and extending the framework to all food brings massive backlogs, years of delay, and regulatory paralysis. And there is no point of the model in the speeches of proposition team where they tackle these issues. The reason why opposition win is because yes, we bring you a status quo that might not be perfect, but tackles this point perfectly. Second point of clash, risk analysis. Proposition team says that they claim that all foods should be equally risky, considered equally risky, and therefore have a homologation in the legislation. So to them, first they say that historical consumption is not enough and is dismissed as unscientific, but later they come to us, and I quote said by the first speaker, that their side of the house is more safe because it brings out the history of product. So what exactly is your position in history? Are you taking that into consideration or not? Please engage with that. And last point of clash, the discrimination clash. What an interesting clash. So first of all, the reason why it falls down is because first, even if you don't have novel food in all the food chain and you decide to extend that, there are other regulations that companies have to take into consideration. You do not take into consideration that type of discrimination. And the real discrimination we've proven to you is, again, the small enterprises, discrimination you didn't tackle in any point. And that's exactly why opposition wins. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 8 minutes, 27 seconds. So we concluded the first part of this debate, and then we conclude the debate with the reply speech, starting from the reply of opposition. Please.
Okay. Okay, then if everyone's ready, let's start. Panel, in my speech, as the reply opposition speech, 3 main clashes, why we have won this debate and why proposition, thanks to their flaws and uncertainty, has lost indeed. But first, let me reassess again the framework that we are moving in, because the proposition actually has misunderstood it. What picture of the world does the proposition team give you? A world where non-novel foods are supposedly unregulated because they completely ignore the existence of general food law, as we have shown you in our speeches, and then a scenario where food safety is not granted, but that's not true, as we've shown you through our battles and our arguments that general food law is more than enough to grant safety, and that the reform is unnecessary because in the first place, safety is already granted. And the very first problem that they also brought, which is to grant safety, is already assessing the status quo because we have different legislations for different category of foods. But let's move on to the clashes of this debate. So the first one, feasibility and cost, the most fundamental one because it shows us why the proposition's model doesn't stand and actually gives us no impact, the impacts that they're trying to defend during their speeches. So what do they tell you? That actually their plan could cost much, and then they give you different ways they could implement it without actually showing us a proper way to do it and adding things as they move on in their debate. And they say that just costs are justified by the granting of safety. But first of all, their model is unclear. And then, as we've shown you in our rebuttals, if we can't implement it, what impacts does it bring? It doesn't bring any impact. You can't expect something that is not implementable to give us any positive results, any upsides. We tell you that it's simply not feasible, and it's also necessary. Why? Because the status quo already works, and the reform would just be another burden on the back of the European Union, which now is also occupied in other matters. Now, moving on to our second clash, which is about risk analysis and safety. What does the proposition side tell you in this debate? They tell you that safety is not granted, and that is a problem, and that they will improve it. But I've already told you before in the previous clash that their model is not implementable, so we wouldn't have safety improvement. But the fundamental point is also that they have assumed, as we have shown you in our third speech, they assume mostly and always that now the safety that is granted is insufficient. And it's their framework that is flawed because they haven't given us any examples, relevant examples, of how safety is not granted now for non-novel foods. So they simply assume that it's not granted now, but that's not the case. What do we tell you about safety? We tell you that it's already granted in an efficient way, and that model simply doesn't grant it anymore, that it actually, the current model of the status quo does. And this is why we defend the status quo. Now, moving on to the final clash of this debate, discrimination and equality. What does the proposition tell you? They tell you that now it's not granted, and they aim to grant it. But the point is that with discrimination and equality is not a problem in today's debate, because discrimination is not something that must be assessed, as equality is not something required in the food law system, because they have confused equality with doing the same thing for everyone, which is wrong. And we've shown you that actually equality is something that assesses any single need for any type of food. They have confused the fact that we have two different laws for two different foods with the fact that we don't have any law for the non-novel foods. We tell you that equality is not a problem now because it's already granted. Non-novel foods have to undergo assessments that are made for them, and non-novels undergo assessments that are made for them by the general food law. So, concluding my speech, why should we reject the motion, and why must we reject the motion? First, their plan is unfeasible and simply gives us no impact. Second, it's unnecessary because the framework of laws we have now for the general food law is already enough, and then the impact is only negative. It damages the consumers, the small companies, and the EU in the first place. So these are the three reasons why we have won and the proposition has lost through their flaws. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you. 4 minutes and 27 seconds. Oh. And so if we are all ready, we can conclude this debate with the reply speech of proposition team. Please.
Panel, we arrived to the end of this lovely and enriching debate, and we thank opposition team for the lovely discussion we have had this evening. So why did we win this debate? I think we won this debate mainly because we won 3 point of clash. The first is whether the law for novel food is useful or not, and we think it is. The second is about the protection and protecting the citizens, and the third one is tradition. What about the first point of clash? So they told us that the new regulation, the regulation for novel food, won't bring new anything to the status quo, as the laws for food that are already enacted are sufficient. But this is not true, and we brought to you throughout all our debate that many examples about products that are not healthy and are traded because they don't have to undergo the laws and the restrictions of novel foods. Moving on protection of citizens. Opposition team is telling us that they will protect the consumers, the producers, of which country? Because it seems like they want to talk about the European Union, but they're not considering that some countries of the European Union are entered the Union after the 2000, and so all their products are all considered novel foods. So they're only protecting only few of these industries, only the most Western countries, let's say France, Germany, Italy, that are the most healthier of the Union. And so they're not giving everyone the same opportunities or protecting the same citizens and consumers. However, we, by extending to everyone the same law, giving everyone the same possibility to trade and to enter the market, we give everyone, the consumers and the producers, the same protection that opposition is failing to give them. Another aspect is tradition. They told us that we told you that in the first speech that many products are traded and consumed because people believe that as they are traditional, they are safe. However, once again, we are putting some countries ahead of others, and we're telling you, yes, Italian, we should be proud of our tradition, but only of certain countries and not all of them. So we want to be clear. When the European Union moves, it moves all together. It moves all together with the same laws, with the same restrictions, with the same values that they are not bringing in the status quo, that they are not, and that they're not preserved at the present moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 3 minutes and 23 seconds. Okay. Thank you for this debate. You can clap each other. Thank you. So we go to analyze the debate and to decide, and we will return in a reasonable time. Wait here.